fractions can be changed into decimals and even into percents. So for example, this example I'm going to show you how we can take a fraction and change it into a decimal. Now notice we have 1 over 2. 1 over 2 can also be looked as 1 divided by 2 because the slash means divide. So if I'm saying 1 divided by 2, that means if I'm doing my long division, the 2, which is the denominator, is on the outside and the 1 is on the inside. And then we do our division using the long division technique. So I'm going to say how many times can 2 go into 1? 2 cannot go into 1. It actually goes 0 times because 0 2's fit inside of 1. So I put my 0. But remember, in a normal number, there's a decimal point at the back of the 1. We usually don't write it, but there is a decimal point at the back of the 1. Think about writing $1. We can write $1 as 1.00, and that's still $1. So there's a decimal point at the back of the 1. So I can add that decimal point in. And again, there are a bunch of zeros at the back of the decimal point. So I can add a 0 at the back here. And now I can look at the problem as 2 into 10. The decimal point goes directly on top. And then I ask myself, how many times can 2 go into 10? 2 goes into 10 5 times. And I continue. 2 times 5 is 10. Subtract, I have 0. So my 1 over 2 1/2 is the same thing as 0.5. That is how we can change a fraction into a decimal. Let us do another example. Let us say that we have 1 over 4. And we are asked to change 1 over 4 into a decimal. Again, we look at it and we remember that 1 over 4 means 1 divided by 4. That means the 4 is out there and the 1 is in there. So I'm going to say, how many times can 4 go into 1? That goes 0 times. Again, at the back of a normal number, there's a decimal point, so I can add that point in and add a 0. And now I can say, how many times can 4 go into 10? Put the decimal point directly on top. 4 into 10 goes 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. And I subtract. If I'm subtracting 10, again, we're acting like the point is not there. We are acting like the decimal point is not there. So 10 take away 8 gives me 2. I can continue adding a 0 because remember, at the end of a decimal point, there are an infinite amount of zeros at the end here. So I can add a 0 and continue. How many times can 4 go into 20? 4 into 20 goes 5 times. 4 times 5 gives me 20. Subtract, I get 0. There are no more numbers to bring down. So therefore, 1 over 4 is the same thing as 0.25. So 1 over 4 is the same thing as 0.25. And that's exactly why 0.25 25 cents is called a quarter. If I'm asked to change 2 over 5 2/5 into a decimal, I can think about, again, 2/5 as 2 divided by 5. Again, the slash means divide. That means that my 5 is outside if I'm putting it into long division fashion, and my 2 is on the inside. Now I'm going to say, how many times can 5 go into 2? 5 goes into 2 0 times. Whenever I have a normal number, that normal number, there's a point at the back, and I can continue to add zeros forever going down in this direction here. So I can add a 0, and you see where that point is? I put the point directly on top. Now I'm going to see how many times can 5 go into 20. 5 goes into 20 4 times. 5 times 4, that's 20. I subtract, I get 0. I have no remainder, so I don't need to bring down anything else. So 2 over 5 as a fraction written in decimal form is 0.4. So 2 over 5 is the same thing as 0.4. Let's try another example. Let's try this time. Let us try an improper fraction, 5 over 3. Write 5 over 3 as a decimal. Again, this means 5 divided by 3. So the 3 is outside and the 5 is on the inside. How many times can 3 go into 5? That goes 1 time. 3 times 1, that gives me 3. Subtract, I get 2. If we were writing this as a mixed number, we would have said our answer is 1 2/3. But the question is asking us to change it into a decimal. So that means we need to put our decimal point. Again, remember at the back of the 5, there's a decimal point right there and a bunch of zeros continuing forever. So we can continue adding zeros. So that means I can have my point here. So my point goes directly on top. And then this 0 can be brought down. And now I have 20. So I'm going to say, how many times can 3 go into 20? That goes 6 times. 3 times 6, this gives me 18. Subtract, I get a remainder of 2. I can bring down the next 0. How many times can 3 go into 18? 6 times again. 3 times 6, 18. Subtract, I get a 2. You notice something that's going on. Every time I will end up getting 2 as my remainder, which when I add a 0 gives me 20, and then I will continue saying 3 into 20 goes 6 times. 3 times 6 gives me 18, and this will continue forever. So usually in a question like that, what you are asked to do is round off. So they might ask you to round off this answer to the nearest 10th place. If they ask you to round off the nearest 10th place, you look at this number. If they ask you to round it to the nearest 100th place, you look at the second number at the back of the point, etc. So depending when these numbers continue forever, we usually call this a recurring decimal, and it will never stop. So usually we'll end up having to round off our answer. So a way of writing this answer is I could write the answer as approximately 1.67. Again, that's because I rounded off. If I'm rounding off to the 100th place, that means I'm stopping right here. That means since this is a 5 or more, then this number goes up and I get a 7. So sometimes that can happen. And this is how we can change a fraction into a decimal.